Chapter 45. Rescue. Shay. You made it! Shay's stunning smile faded as she looked down at the crumpled form of Dr. Cable. What's with her? Tally blinked, awed by the transformation of her friend. Shay's beauty seemed to snuff out everything inside Tally. Her fear, surprise, and excitement fled, leaving nothing but amazement. You turned. Duh, she said. David, you're both okay.
Hi.
His voice was dry, his hands shaking as they gripped the power jack.
We need your help, Shay.
Yeah, I guess you do. She looked down at Dr. Cable again and sighed. You guys still know how to make trouble, I see. Tally averted her eyes from Shay's beauty, trying to focus her thoughts. Where's everyone else? David's parents, Croy? Right in here. Shay gestured over one shoulder. All locked up. Dr. C has been totally bogus to us.
Keep her here,
David said. He pushed past Shay and through the door. Tally saw a row of small doors inside the long room, each with a tiny window set in it. Shay beamed at her. I'm so glad you're all right, Tally. The thought of you all alone in the wild. Of course, you weren't alone, were you? Beating Shay's eyes, Tally was overwhelmed all over again. What did they do to you? Shay smiled. Besides the obvious? Yeah, no. Tally shook her head, not knowing how to ask Shay if she was brain damaged. Are any of the rest of them pretty? No, I got to be first because I made the most trouble. You should have seen me kicking and biting. Shay chuckled. They forced you. Yeah, Dr. C can be a major pain. It's kind of a relief, though. Tally swallowed. A relief? Yeah, I hated this place. The only reason I'm here is that Dr. C wanted me to come by and talk to the Smokies. You live in New Prettytown, Tally said softly. She tried to see past the beauty to find whatever was behind Shay's wide, perfect eyes. Yeah, I just came from the best party. Tally finally heard how slurred Shay's words were. She was drunk. Maybe that's why she was acting so strangely. But she called the others the Smokies. She wasn't one of them anymore. You go to parties, Shay? While everyone here is locked up? Well, I guess so, Shay said defensively. I mean, they'll all get out once they turn. Once Dr. Cable gets over her stupid power trip. She looked at the unconscious form on the floor and shook her head. She's going to be in a bad mood tomorrow, though. Thanks to you two. The sound of complaining metal came from the detention room. Tally heard more voices. Of course, sounds like no one will be around to see it, Shay said. So how are you two doing anyway? Tally opened her mouth, closed it, then managed to answer. We're good. That's great. Listen, sorry I was such a pain about all that. You know what uglies are like. Shay laughed. Well, of course you do. So you don't hate me? Don't be silly, Tally. I'm glad to hear that. Of course, Shay's blessing was meaningless. It wasn't forgiveness, just brain damage. You did me a big favor getting me out of that smoke place. You can't really believe that, Shay. What do you mean? How could you change your mind so quickly? Shay laughed. It took exactly one hot shower to change my mind. She reached out and touched Tally's hair, tangled and knotted from 2 weeks of camping out and riding all day. Speaking of showers, you are a total mess. Tally blinked. Hot tears were forcing themselves into her eyes. Shay wanted so much to keep her own face, to live on her own terms outside the city. But that desire had been extinguished. I didn't mean to betray you, she said softly. Shay glanced over her shoulder, then turned back and smiled. He doesn't know that you're working for Dr. C, does he? Don't worry, Tally, she whispered, putting one elegant finger to her lips. Your ugly little secret is safe with me. Tally swallowed, wondering if Shay had found out the whole story. Maybe Dr. C had told them all what she'd done. A buzzing sound came from beside Dr. Cable. On the work tablet she'd been carrying, a request light blinked with an incoming call. Tally picked up the tablet and handed it to Shay. Talk to them. Shay winked, pushed a button, and said, Hey, it's me, Shay. No, I'm sorry. Dr. Cable's busy. Doing what? Well, it's complicated. She muted the device. Shouldn't you be rescuing people or something, Tally? That's the point of this little trick, right? You'll stay here? Duh, this looks bubbly. Just because I'm pretty doesn't mean I'm totally boring. Tally brushed past her and into the room. 2 doors had been ripped open. David's mother and another Smoky freed. The 2 were dressed in orange jumpsuits, with stunned and sleepy looks on their faces. David was working another door, his power jack thrust into a small slat at floor level. Tally saw Croy's face peering wide-eyed through one of the tiny windows, and planted her power jack under his door. It whinnied to life, and the thick metal screeched as it bent upward. David, they know something's up, she called.
Okay, we're almost done here.
Her jack had wrenched a small gap in the metal, not big enough. Tally reset the tool, and the metal groaned again. Her days of pulling up railroad ties soon paid off, the jack tearing a hole in the sides of a doggy door. Croy's arms appeared, then his head, his jumpsuit ripping on the jagged spurs of metal as he wriggled. Maddie grabbed his hands and pulled him through. That's everyone who's left, she said. Let's go.
What about Dad?
David cried. We can't help him. Maddie ran into the hall. Tally and David shared an anxious look and followed. Maddie was dashing down the hall toward the elevator, dragging Shay by the wrist behind her. Shay stabbed the tablet's talk bud and said, Wait a second, I think she's coming back now. Hold, please. She giggled and muted the device again. Bring Cable, Maddie called. We need her. Mom! David ran after her. Tally looked at Croy, then down at Dr. Cable's crumpled form. Croy nodded, and they each took a wrist, dragging the woman along the slick floor at a trot, Tally's grippy shoes squealing. When the party reached the elevator, Maddie grabbed Dr. Cable by the collar and pulled her up to the eye-reader. The woman groaned once, softly. Maddie carefully pried open one of her eyes, and the elevator pinged, its doors sliding open. Maddie tugged off the doctor's interface ring and dropped her to the floor, then pulled Shay inside. Tally and the other Smokies followed, but David stood his ground.
Mom, where's Dad?
We can't help him. Maddie yanked the tablet away from Shay and cracked it against the wall, then pulled David in against his protests. The doors closed, and the elevator asked, Which floor? Roof, Maddie said, the interface ring still in her hand. The elevator began to move, Tally's ears complaining at the swift descent. What's our escape plan? Maddie snapped. The glazed look was completely gone from her eyes, as if she'd gone to sleep last night expecting to be rescued this morning. Hoverboards, Tally managed to answer. 4 of them. Realizing she hadn't done so yet, Tally adjusted her crash visits to call them in. Oh, cool, Shay said. You know, I haven't been boarding since I left the smoke. There's 7 of us, Maddie said. Tally, you take Shay. Asterix and Ride double up. Croy, you go alone and throw them off track. David, I'll ride with you.
Mom,
David pleaded.
If he's pretty, can't you cure him, or at least try?
Your father's not pretty, David, she answered softly. He's dead.